Life couldn't have been better for Rebecca Chen. At 42 years old, she was living what most people would call the American dream. She woke up every morning in her beautiful house in the suburbs of Seattle, kissed her husband goodbye, and drove to work in her luxury car. Her office sat on the 20th floor of a gleaming glass building downtown, with views that stretched all the way to the mountains. Rebecca had just been promoted to Chief Operating Officer of one of the most respected tech companies in the Pacific Northwest. It was a huge deal, the kind of promotion that gets announced in press releases and celebrated with champagne. Her colleagues threw her a party. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages for days. She was finally at the top, and she'd earned every bit of it through years of hard work, late nights, and dedication. Her family was thriving too. Her husband, Daniel, was a successful lawyer who worked at a reputable firm in the city. They'd been married for 18 years, and while every marriage has its ups and downs, theirs was solid, built on trust, or so everyone thought. Their daughter, Amy, was 16 and getting ready to apply for colleges. She was smart, confident, and had her mother's drive. Their son, Kevin, was 14 and obsessed with basketball. He spent every evening shooting hoops in their driveway, dreaming of making the varsity team next year. From the outside, Rebecca's life looked perfect. Her neighbors envied her. Her co-workers respected her. Her family loved her. She volunteered at the local community center on weekends, mentored young women in tech, and donated generously to causes she believed in. People saw her as someone who had it all together, someone who'd worked hard and deserved every bit of success that came her way. But here's the thing about perfect lives. Sometimes they're built on foundations that aren't as solid as they appear. Sometimes there are cracks hidden beneath the surface, invisible to everyone else but always there, always waiting to split wide open. Rebecca carried a secret, a devastating, life-altering secret that she'd buried so deep she sometimes convinced herself it had never happened at all. It was a secret that lived in the darkest corner of her mind, locked away behind walls she'd spent 23 years building. She never talked about it. Never thought about it if she could help it. She'd become an expert at pushing it down whenever it tried to surface, usually in the quiet moments before sleep or during long drives when her mind had nothing else to focus on. The guilt was always there, though, like a heavy stone she carried in her chest. Some days it felt lighter than others, especially when she was busy with work or laughing with her kids, but it never truly went away. She'd learned to live with it. The way people learn to live with chronic pain. You adapt. You find ways to function. You keep moving forward because what else can you do? Rebecca told herself she was a good person despite that one terrible thing from her past. She worked hard to be better, to make up for it in some cosmic way. Every act of kindness, every charitable donation, every time she helped someone at work or in her community, it felt like she was balancing the scales somehow, making amends without anyone knowing what she was atoning for. Her transformation from who she was back then to who she'd become now felt complete. She wasn't that scared 19-year-old girl anymore. She was Rebecca Chen, successful executive, devoted mother, pillar of the community. She'd built a new identity, a new life, and she'd done it through sheer determination and hard work. 23 years is a long time, long enough that the past feels like it happened to someone else entirely, long enough that you start to believe maybe, just maybe, you've actually escaped it. Maybe that chapter of your life is truly closed. Maybe you've paid your dues in guilt and sleepless nights and now you deserve to move on. Rebecca had convinced herself of exactly that. She deserved this life. She'd worked for it. She'd changed. She was nothing like the person she'd been back then. That terrified girl who made the worst decision of her life on a dark March night in 1999 was gone, dead and buried along with the secret, or so she thought. On this particular Monday morning, Rebecca sat in her new office arranging family photos on her desk. There was one of Daniel and her on their anniversary trip to Hawaii, another of Amy at her piano recital, Kevin's school picture from last year, showing off the gap where he'd lost a tooth. She smiled at each one, feeling grateful despite the constant low hum of guilt she'd learned to live with. Her assistant knocked on the door, bringing in her morning coffee and a stack of reports that needed reviewing. Rebecca thanked her and dove into work. There were budget meetings to prepare for, a presentation to finish, emails that had piled up over the weekend. She lost herself in the familiar rhythm of her job, the way she always did. Work was good for keeping the mind occupied, keeping the past where it belonged. Lunchtime came and went. Rebecca ate a salad at her desk while video calling with her team about an upcoming product launch. The afternoon brought more meetings, more decisions, more of the high-stakes responsibility that came with her new position. She thrived on it. The pressure, the challenges, the satisfaction of solving complex problems. This was who she was now. By 5 o'clock, she was wrapping up her day, looking forward to going home and hearing about Kevin's basketball practice. Daniel had texted earlier saying he'd pick up dinner on his way home. It was shaping up to be a perfectly ordinary, perfectly pleasant evening. Rebecca gathered her things, slipped her laptop into her bag, and checked her phone one last time before heading out. 3 new emails had come in during the last meeting. 2 were work-related. The third one made her blood stop cold in her veins. The sender's name jumped out at her like a scream in a silent room. Detective Patricia Bowman, Seattle Police Department. Her hands started shaking before she even opened it. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. The walls of her beautiful corner office suddenly felt like they were closing in. 23 years of carefully maintained distance from her past evaporated in an instant. With trembling fingers, she tapped the email open. The message was short, professional, and absolutely terrifying. It said they needed to discuss an incident from March 1999. New evidence had come to light. She needed to contact them immediately. There was a phone number, an address, a case number she recognized despite all the years that had passed. Rebecca sank into her chair, her legs no longer able to hold her up. The perfect life she'd built, the new identity she'd created, the future she'd planned for her family, all of it suddenly felt like sand slipping through her fingers. The past she'd buried had somehow clawed its way back to the surface, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. Rebecca sat frozen in her office chair, staring at her phone screen like it was a bomb about to explode. The email from Detective Patricia Bowman glowed on the display, each word burning itself into her brain. March 1999, new evidence. Contact immediately. Those 3 phrases kept repeating in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her first instinct was pure panic. Her breath came in short, rapid gasps. Her vision blurred at the edges. This couldn't be happening, not now. Not after all these years. She'd been so careful. She'd moved on. She'd become a different person. How could this possibly be coming back to haunt her now? She read the email again, searching for details, but there weren't many. Just that clinical professional tone that police use when they're being deliberately vague. They wanted her to contact them. They weren't showing up at her door yet, which meant something. Maybe it wasn't as bad as she feared. Maybe this was some kind of routine follow-up. Maybe they had questions about something unrelated. But deep down, Rebecca knew better. You don't get contacted by a detective about something from 23 years ago unless it's serious. Unless they've found something. Unless the carefully buried past is about to become the very public present. She looked at the time. It was already past 5:30. The office had emptied out while she sat there in shock. Through her glass walls, she could see the cleaning crew making their rounds on the floor below. The city lights were starting to twinkle as dusk settled over Seattle. Everything looked normal out there. The world was going on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In the span of reading one email, Rebecca's entire life had shifted on its axis. She tried to think clearly, to be logical about this. She was smart. She'd built a successful career by staying calm under pressure and making good decisions. But this wasn't a business problem she could solve in a conference room. This was her past, and it had teeth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel asking if she was on her way home. The sight of his name on her screen made her stomach twist with guilt. Daniel didn't know. Nobody knew. She'd kept this secret from everyone for more than 2 decades. Her husband, the man she'd promised to share everything with, had no idea who she really was. What she'd done. She typed back a quick response saying she'd be late, stuck in a meeting. Another lie added to the pile. At this point, what was one more? Rebecca needed to think. She needed to figure out what to do before she went home and faced her family. Should she call the detective right now? Should she get a lawyer first? Should she tell Daniel before the police showed up at their door? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. She grabbed her purse and left the office, taking the elevator down to the parking garage. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. In her car, she sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, just staring at nothing. The concrete walls of the parking garage seemed appropriate somehow. Cold, gray, closing in. Finally, she pulled up the detective's number and just stared at it. Her thumb hovered over the call button. This was it. Once she made this call, there was no going back. The truth would start coming out piece by piece until everyone knew what she'd done. But what choice did she have? Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. If anything, that would make things worse. She took a deep breath and pressed call before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. Detective Bowman. Rebecca's voice came out smaller than she intended. This is Rebecca Chen. I got your email. There was a pause on the other end and she could hear papers rustling. Mrs. Chen, thank you for calling back so quickly. I need to speak with you about an incident that occurred in March of 1999. Are you familiar with what I'm referring to? Rebecca closed her eyes. Yes. I'd like to meet with you in person to discuss this. Would tomorrow morning work for you? Tomorrow morning. Less than 15 hours away. Rebecca's mind raced through her calendar. She had meetings scheduled. Important ones. But none of that mattered anymore, did it? Her professional life, her reputation, everything she'd built, it was all about to come crashing down. Where? Rebecca managed to ask. Detective Bowman gave her an address for a coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood, away from the busy downtown core. Not the police station. That was something at least. Maybe they were trying to be discreet, or maybe they just wanted her to feel comfortable enough to talk freely. Either way, meeting in public felt less threatening than an interrogation room. 9 o'clock, the detective said. And Mrs. Chen? I'd suggest you come alone. This conversation needs to happen between us first. The call ended and Rebecca sat there in the silence of her car, phone still pressed to her ear. Come alone. Don't bring a lawyer. Or was the detective implying she shouldn't tell her husband? Either way, the message was clear. They wanted to talk to her before things got official. She finally started the car and drove home on autopilot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. The familiar route through her neighborhood looked different somehow, like she was seeing it for the last time. The nice houses with their perfect lawns, the kids riding bikes before dinner, the normalcy of suburban life that she was about to lose. When she pulled into her driveway, Daniel's car was already there. Through the living room window, she could see him moving around in the kitchen. Kevin was probably in his room doing homework, or more likely playing video games. Amy was at soccer practice and wouldn't be home for another hour. Rebecca sat in her car for a few extra minutes gathering herself. She checked her face in the mirror. Her eyes were red, but maybe Daniel would think she was just tired from work. She practiced a smile. It looked fake, but it would have to do. Inside, the house smelled like the Chinese takeout Daniel had picked up. Usually that smell made her happy. Tonight, it made her nauseous. Daniel greeted her with a kiss on the cheek and started talking about his day. Some case at work that was giving him trouble. Rebecca nodded along, barely hearing a word. They ate dinner with Kevin, who talked nonstop about basketball tryouts coming up next week. Rebecca pushed her food around her plate, forcing herself to take bites so no one would ask if she was okay. When Amy got home, she joined them for dessert, chattering about her soccer game that weekend. Rebecca watched her family, really looked at them, and felt her heart breaking. This might be one of the last normal evenings they'd have together. By this time tomorrow, they might all know the truth. Daniel might look at her with disgust instead of love. Her kids might be ashamed to call her their mother. Later that night, lying in bed next to Daniel while he slept peacefully, Rebecca stared at the ceiling. She had 9 hours until her meeting with Detective Bowman. 9 hours to decide how much to confess. 9 hours to prepare for her life to fall apart. The secret she'd kept buried for 23 years was about to surface, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Rebecca barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back there. March 1999. She was 19 years old again, and her name was still Maggie Sullivan. College had been everything she'd dreamed of. She'd gotten into a good school, made friends, and was studying business. But the best part, or what she thought was the best part back then, was her boyfriend. Tyler Richardson came from serious money, the kind of family that had buildings named after them on campus. He was handsome, confident, and way out of her league, or so everyone told her. Maggie had grown up in a working-class family. Her dad drove a truck and her mom worked at a grocery store. They'd saved every penny to help her go to college. She was the first person in her family to make it this far, and they were so proud of her. She called home every Sunday without fail. Dating Tyler felt like stepping into a different world. Fancy restaurants, weekend trips to his family's vacation homes, parties where everyone seemed to know important people. It was intoxicating for a 19-year-old girl from a small town. She felt like Cinderella and Tyler was her prince. But Tyler had a dark side. He drank too much. He had a temper. And he had this way of making Maggie feel like she owed him something, like she should be grateful he was with someone like her. Looking back now, Rebecca could see all the red flags. But at 19, she'd been too naive to recognize them. That night in March started at a party at one of the fraternity houses. Tyler had been drinking heavily and they'd gotten into a fight about something stupid. Maggie couldn't even remember what it was about now. Tyler had stormed off, leaving her alone at the party. She'd had a few drinks herself, not enough to be drunk, but enough that she probably shouldn't have been driving. But she wanted to leave. She wanted to get away from the loud music and the drunk college kids and the whole scene. Tyler had driven them there in his car, but he'd left the keys with her when he stormed off. So she took them and left. The roads were dark and empty that time of night. It was raining, just a light drizzle that made the streets slick and the streetlights look blurry. Maggie was upset, distracted thinking about the fight and wondering if Tyler was going to break up with her. She wasn't paying attention the way she should have been. She never saw the man until it was too late. He stepped off the curb right in front of her car. She slammed on the brakes, but the wet roads made the car slide. There was a horrible thud, and then he was just lying there in the street behind her car, not moving. Maggie sat frozen in the driver's seat, her whole body shaking. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. She looked around frantically. The street was empty. No cars, no witnesses. Just her and the man lying motionless on the wet pavement. She should have stopped. She should have called for help. She should have done a lot of things differently. But she panicked. She was 19 years old, terrified and not thinking clearly. All she could think was that her life was over. Her dreams, her future, her family's pride in her, all of it gone in one terrible moment. So she drove away. She left him there in the rain and drove back to Tyler's apartment. She was crying so hard she could barely see the road. When she got there, she pounded on his door until he answered. She was hysterical, barely able to get the words out. Tyler sobered up fast when he understood what had happened. And here's where things got even worse. Instead of telling her to go to the police, instead of doing the right thing, Tyler made a decision. His family had connections, he said, lawyers, people who could fix this. But they had to act fast. That night became a blur of phone calls and instructions. Tyler's father showed up with a man who never gave his name. The car disappeared. Tyler drove it somewhere and it was never seen again. The man, who might have been a lawyer, or might have been something else entirely, told Maggie in very clear terms that this never happened. She was never in that car. She was never on that street. If she ever told anyone, if she ever talked to the police, there would be consequences for her and her family. Then he gave her a plane ticket. She was going to study abroad in Europe for a year. It was all arranged. She'd leave in 3 days. A whole year for things to cool down, for the case to go cold, for everyone to forget. Maggie was too scared and too broken to argue. She got on that plane and spent a year in London, living with the weight of what she'd done. She followed the news obsessively on the internet. The man she'd hit was named Andrew Patterson. He was 34 years old. He had a wife and 3 young children. He'd been walking home from his shift at a restaurant where he worked as a cook. He died at the scene. The police investigated, but without the car, without witnesses, without any leads, the case went cold. Andrew's family pleaded on the news for anyone with information to come forward. His wife cried and begged. His children were so young they barely understood why their daddy wasn't coming home, and Maggie said nothing. She stayed silent and let them suffer without answers. When she came back from Europe a year later, everything had changed. Tyler had graduated and moved to New York. They never spoke again. Maggie transferred to a different school across the country. She slowly started rebuilding her life, but she couldn't be Maggie Sullivan anymore. That girl had died on that rainy March night. Over the next few years, she legally changed her name to Rebecca Chen. Chen had been her grandmother's maiden name. Rebecca just felt like a fresh start. She changed her hair, her style, everything about her appearance that she could. She became someone new. She threw herself into school and then her career. She worked harder than anyone else, driven by guilt and the desperate need to prove she was worth something. She met Daniel at a work conference 5 years after the accident. He knew nothing about her past because there was nothing to know. Rebecca Chen had no past. She'd appeared fully formed as a successful young professional with her whole life ahead of her. She'd convinced herself over the years that she'd paid her dues. The guilt ate at her every single day. She had nightmares. She donated money to charities that helped families of accident victims. She lived a good life, helped people, tried to make a positive impact on the world. Surely that counted for something. Surely she deserved to move on. But sitting in that coffee shop the next morning waiting for Detective Bowman, Rebecca knew the truth. You don't get to decide when you've paid enough. The debt she owed wasn't hers to forgive. It belonged to Andrew Patterson's family, to his children who grew up without a father, to his wife who never got justice. And now, 23 years later, that debt was finally coming due. Detective Patricia Bowman was already sitting at a corner table when Rebecca arrived at the coffee shop. She was a woman in her late 40s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes were sharp and assessing as Rebecca approached. There was no warmth in her expression, but no obvious hostility either. Just professional detachment. Rebecca's hands shook as she sat down. She'd barely managed to choke down half a piece of toast that morning and told Daniel she had an early meeting. Another lie. The lies were piling up so high now she could barely keep track of them all. "Thank you for meeting me," Detective Bowman said, pulling out a folder from her bag. "Can I get you anything? Coffee?" Rebecca shook her head. Her stomach was in knots. She didn't think she could keep anything down. "I'm fine. Let's just get this over with." The detective nodded and opened her folder. Inside were photographs, documents, papers with official-looking headers. Rebecca caught a glimpse of one photo and immediately looked away. It was from that night. The street, the rain. She felt bile rise in her throat. "I'm going to be direct with you, Mrs. Chen, or should I say Ms. Sullivan?" Detective Bowman's eyes locked onto Rebecca's face, watching for a reaction. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. They knew about the name change. Of course they knew. It's Chen now, legally changed in 2003. Right. So here's what we know. The detective spread out several papers on the table between them. March 15, 1999. Andrew Patterson was killed in a hit-and-run accident at approximately 11:30 p.m. on Riverside Avenue. The driver fled the scene. No witnesses came forward. The investigation went cold. Rebecca sat silent, her mouth dry as sand. But technology has changed a lot in 23 years, Detective Bowman continued. The city recently completed a project to digitize old traffic camera footage. We're talking hundreds of thousands of hours of tape that was just sitting in storage. Most of it is useless, degraded, or shows nothing important. But some of it is very interesting. She pulled out a grainy photograph and placed it in front of Rebecca. It showed a dark sedan on a rainy street. The image quality was poor, but you could make out the license plate if you looked closely. This footage was recovered from a camera 2 blocks from the accident scene. The timestamp puts this car passing through approximately 8 minutes after Andrew Patterson was struck. The vehicle matches the description of a car registered to Tyler Richardson at the time. A car that mysteriously disappeared the next day, reported stolen but never found. Rebecca felt like she was going to pass out. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Now this alone wouldn't be enough, the detective said. After all this time, connecting that car to the accident would be difficult. But then something interesting happened about 2 months ago. Tyler Richardson checked himself into a hospice facility. He has stage 4 cancer. He's dying. Rebecca's eyes widened. She hadn't thought about Tyler in years. Hadn't wanted to. Apparently, facing death does something to people, makes them want to confess their sins, clear their conscience before they go. Tyler Richardson called the Seattle Police Department and asked to speak to someone about an unsolved case from 1999. He provided a detailed statement about what happened that night, including the name of the person who was actually driving the car. The detective paused. "Your name?" "Margaret Sullivan, now known as Rebecca Chen." The world tilted sideways. Rebecca couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. Tyler had kept the secret for 23 years. Why would he break now? But she knew why. People facing death want peace. They want forgiveness. They don't want to carry secrets into whatever comes next. He gave us everything, Detective Bowman continued. How his father helped cover it up, where they took the car, how they sent you out of the country. He even provided documentation. His father kept records, can you believe that? Insurance for himself, probably, in case everything ever came back to bite him. Those records just happened to be in Tyler's possession when he decided to talk. Rebecca finally found her voice. Is Tyler's father being charged too? Richard Richardson died 6 years ago. Heart attack. So no, we can't charge him. But you're still here, Mrs. Chen. Very much alive and living a very nice life from what I can see. The detective's tone wasn't judgmental exactly, but there was an edge to it. Rebecca didn't blame her. Here she was, successful and comfortable, while Andrew Patterson had been dead for 23 years. While his children grew up without a father. While his wife struggled to raise 3 kids alone. What happens now? Rebecca asked quietly. That partly depends on you, Detective Bowman said. I'm giving you a heads up before this becomes official. As of right now, this is still an open investigation. I wanted to hear your side of things before we move forward. You have the right to remain silent, of course. You have the right to an attorney. But I'm offering you a chance to talk to me first, off the record. Off the record. Rebecca knew what that meant. The detective wanted her confession, wanted her to admit what happened, wanted her to make their case easier. And part of Rebecca wanted to confess too. She was so tired of carrying this weight, so tired of lying, so tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. But she thought about Daniel, about Amy and Kevin, about the life they'd all built together. The moment she confessed, everything would change. Her kids would see her on the news. Her husband would feel betrayed. Her career would be over. Her reputation destroyed. I need a lawyer, Rebecca said. Detective Bowman nodded, like she'd expected that answer. I understand. But Mrs. Chen, I want you to think about something. Andrew Patterson's family has waited 23 years for answers. His wife, Linda, still lives in the area. His children are adults now with families of their own. His oldest daughter was 7 years old when her father died. She barely remembers him. Each word hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She'd tried so hard not to think about them as real people, tried to bury the guilt deep enough that it wouldn't hurt so much. But they were real. They were still here, still suffering, still living with the hole that her actions had created in their lives. You have 24 hours, Detective Bowman said, gathering up her papers and photos. After that, this becomes official. Warrants will be issued. You'll be arrested. The media will find out. Everything will become public. If you choose to cooperate voluntarily, that could work in your favor. Think about it. The detective stood up and handed Rebecca a card with her direct number. Whatever you did or didn't do that night, you were 19 years old. Young, scared, and probably pressured by people who should have known better. The prosecutor will take that into account, but you need to come forward on your own. Doing the right thing 23 years late is still better than never doing it at all. Then she walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Rebecca sitting alone at the table with her entire world crumbling around her. Rebecca sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Other customers came and went. The barista cleaned tables and made drinks. Life continued normally for everyone else. But for Rebecca, time had stopped. 24 hours. That's all she had to decide how to handle this. 24 hours to figure out how to tell her family. 24 hours before everything she'd built came crashing down. She pulled out her phone and stared at Daniel's contact information. She should call him. She should tell him everything right now. He deserved to know. But her finger wouldn't press the call button. Not yet, she wasn't ready. She didn't know if she'd ever be ready. Finally, Rebecca left the coffee shop and got in her car. She drove aimlessly for a while, not ready to go home, not ready to face anyone. Eventually, she found herself parked near the waterfront, staring out at the gray waters of Puget Sound. 23 years ago, she'd made the worst decision of her life. She'd let fear control her actions. She'd let someone else convince her that running away was the answer. She'd been a coward. Now she had another choice to make. And this time, she couldn't run. There was nowhere left to hide. Rebecca spent the entire day driving around the city, unable to go home, unable to face what she needed to do. She called her office and said she was sick. It wasn't a lie. She felt physically ill, like her body was rejecting the reality of her situation. She grabbed fast food she couldn't eat and coffee that went cold in her cup holder. Mostly she just drove and thought. By late afternoon, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't run anymore. She couldn't keep lying. And she couldn't let her family find out about this from the police or, worse, from the news. They deserved to hear it from her, no matter how painful that conversation would be. Around 6 in the evening, she finally drove home. Daniel's car was in the driveway. Through the window, she could see lights on in the kitchen. Normal evening life continuing inside while her whole world was falling apart. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, gathering courage she wasn't sure she possessed. When she walked in, the smell of dinner hit her. Daniel had made spaghetti. Amy was setting the table. And Kevin was doing homework at the kitchen counter, probably finishing something due tomorrow that he'd forgotten about. They all looked up when she came in. "Mom, you look terrible," Amy said. "Are you okay?" Rebecca must have looked as bad as she felt. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. She'd barely slept. Her eyes were probably red and swollen from crying in her car earlier. "I need to talk to all of you," Rebecca said. Her voice came out shaky. "After dinner." "It's important." Daniel's expression shifted from concern to worry. "Rebecca, what's going on?" "After dinner," she repeated. Please, the meal was torture. Rebecca pushed food around her plate while her family ate and talked about their day. Kevin was excited about basketball tryouts tomorrow. Amy complained about a history test she had coming up. Daniel mentioned a difficult client at work. Normal family conversation that felt surreal to Rebecca. This might be the last normal dinner they'd ever have together. When the dishes were cleared, Rebecca asked everyone to sit in the living room. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Amy and Kevin sat on the couch, exchanging confused looks. Daniel settled into his chair, his lawyer instincts clearly kicking in. He knew something serious was coming. "What's this about, Beck?" he asked gently. Rebecca stood in front of them, unable to sit. Her legs felt weak, but sitting felt impossible. She'd rehearsed what to say 100 times in her car, but now all those carefully planned words disappeared. There was no good way to do this. No way to soften the blow. "There's something I need to tell you all," she began. "Something I should have told you a long time ago. Before we got married, Daniel. Before the kids were born. But I didn't, and that was wrong. And now it's coming out anyway, and you deserve to hear it from me first." Amy sat up straighter, her teenage radar picking up on the seriousness. Kevin looked confused. Daniel's face had gone very still, the way it did when he was preparing for bad news. Rebecca took a deep breath. "My name wasn't always Rebecca Chen. I was born Margaret Sullivan. Everyone called me Maggie. I legally changed my name when I was 22 years old." "Okay," Daniel said slowly. "That's not so bad. Lots of people change their names. I changed it because I was running from something I did." The tears started flowing now, and Rebecca didn't bother wiping them away. "When I was 19 years old, I was in college. I was at a party one night, and I left in a car. I shouldn't have been driving. I wasn't drunk, but I'd had a few drinks, and I was upset and distracted. And I hit someone, a man crossing the street. I hit him with the car, and I killed him." The room went completely silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy and suffocating. Amy's hand went to her mouth. Kevin looked like he didn't understand what he was hearing. Daniel just stared at her, his face unreadable. "His name was Andrew Patterson," Rebecca continued, the words tumbling out now. "He was 34 years old. He had a wife and 3 little kids. He was walking home from work, and I hit him, and instead of calling for help, I drove away. I left him there in the street, and I drove away." "Mom," Amy whispered. The word was barely audible. "My boyfriend at the time, his family was rich and connected. They made it all go away. They hid the car, sent me out of the country for a year, told me to keep my mouth shut, and I did. I was scared and weak, and I did exactly what they told me to do. I let that family suffer without answers. I let them think it was some random hit and run that would never be solved. And then I changed my name and built a whole new life and pretended like it never happened." Daniel stood up. His face had gone pale. "Are you telling me that our entire marriage has been based on a lie? That you never thought to mention you killed someone?" "I was going to tell you," Rebecca said desperately. "So many times I wanted to tell you. But the longer I waited, the harder it got. And I convinced myself that it was in the past and it didn't matter anymore. I convinced myself I was a different person and that person deserved a fresh start." "A man died," Daniel said. His voice was getting louder. A husband and father died and you just walked away. Do you have any idea what that makes you? Yes, Rebecca said quietly. A coward. A criminal. Everything you're thinking right now I've thought about myself 1,000 times. Kevin suddenly spoke up, his voice cracking with emotion. So everything about you is fake? Our whole family is fake? No, baby, no. Rebecca moved toward him, but he pulled away. My love for you is real. Everything about our family is real. The only lie is my name and my past. I'm still your mother. I'm still the same person you've always known. No, you're not, Amy said. She was crying now, too. The mom I know would never do something like that. Would never lie for 23 years. I don't even know who you are. Those words cut deeper than anything else. Rebecca had always been so close with her daughter. They talked about everything, or so she thought. Now Amy was looking at her like she was a stranger. Daniel paced the room, his lawyer brain clearly trying to process everything. Why are you telling us this now? After all these years, why now? Because they found out, Rebecca admitted. The police. They recovered some old camera footage and got a confession from someone involved. They contacted me yesterday. I have 24 hours before they make it official. Before they arrest me. Before it's all over the news. Daniel stopped pacing. They're going to arrest you? Yes, probably tomorrow. Detective Bowman gave me a heads up, a chance to come forward voluntarily. But either way, it's happening. And I couldn't let you find out from the police or from watching the news. You deserve to hear it from me. How generous of you, Daniel said bitterly, finally being honest after lying for our entire relationship. Should I be grateful? Rebecca flinched. She deserved his anger. She deserved all of it. I know you're furious. I know this is unforgivable. But I had to tell you. I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just about what I did back then, but about lying to you all these years. You deserved better. You all deserved better. Kevin stood up suddenly, his face red. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you. He ran upstairs and they heard his bedroom door slam. Amy followed a moment later, not even looking at Rebecca as she left. The sound of both bedroom doors slamming echoed through the house. Now it was just Rebecca and Daniel. Her husband of 18 years. The man who knew everything about her except for the one thing that mattered most. Were you ever going to tell me? Daniel asked quietly. If the police hadn't found out, would you have taken this to your grave? Rebecca wanted to say yes, she would have told him eventually. But that would be another lie. I don't know. Probably not. I wanted to believe I'd left it behind for good. Daniel sat down heavily in his chair. He looked older suddenly, worn down by the weight of her confession. I'm a prosecutor, Rebecca. I put people away for this exact kind of thing. Hit and run, leaving the scene, obstruction of justice. Do you know how many times I've argued in court that these criminals deserve serious time? And now I find out I've been sleeping next to one for 18 years. I know how hypocritical this must seem. Hypocritical? Daniel's voice rose again. That doesn't even begin to cover it. You lied to me about who you are. Everything I thought I knew about you, your family, your past, it's all fake. How am I supposed to trust anything you say ever again? Rebecca had no answer for that. She couldn't ask him to trust her. She'd destroyed that trust completely. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice hollow. You need to get a lawyer. A good criminal defense attorney. Someone who isn't me because I can't be anywhere near this case. I'll ask around at the firm tomorrow, get some names. Okay, Rebecca whispered. And I need you to sleep in the guest room tonight. I can't share a bed with you right now. I can't even look at you. That hurt more than Rebecca expected, even though she knew she didn't deserve his comfort. I understand. Daniel stood up to leave the room, then turned back. That family. Andrew Patterson's family. Did you ever try to help them? Anonymously send money? Anything? Rebecca shook her head. I was too scared they'd trace it back to me. Daniel's expression hardened. Of course you were. Because it was always about protecting yourself, wasn't it? Never about doing the right thing. Rebecca barely slept that night in the guest room. The bed felt cold and unfamiliar, even though it was in her own house. She could hear Daniel moving around in their bedroom above her, probably not sleeping either. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the disappointment on her children's faces. Amy's tears, Kevin's anger, the way they'd both looked at her like she was a monster. The next morning came too fast. Rebecca got up at dawn, showered, and put on a simple outfit. professional but not flashy. She'd called the lawyer Daniel had recommended late last night. He'd agreed to meet her at the police station. His name was Richard Torres, and from his reputation, he was one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Seattle. She was going to need the best. She made coffee in the kitchen, standing alone while the house was still quiet. Through the window, she could see the neighborhood starting to wake up. People getting ready for work, kids catching school buses. Normal life continuing while hers fell apart. Daniel came downstairs around 7. He didn't say good morning. He just poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, keeping distance between them. "The lawyer will meet you at 10, he said. His voice was professional, detached, like she was a client instead of his wife. "His name is Richard Torres. He's good. Expensive, but good." "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly. "Don't thank me. I'm doing this for the kids. They don't deserve to have their mother end up in prison without decent representation." He paused. "I called my firm, told them I need to take some personal time. They're asking questions, but I haven't told them anything yet. Give it a few hours, though. Once you turn yourself in, it'll be all over the news." Rebecca's stomach clenched. The news, she hadn't fully processed that part yet. Her face would be everywhere. Her real name and her old name. Her crime laid out for everyone to see. Her job, her reputation, her standing in the community, all of it would be destroyed in a matter of hours. "What about the kids?" she asked. "I'm keeping them home from school today." Amy already texted her friends making up some excuse. Kevin hasn't said a word since last night. He's locked in his room. Daniel set down his coffee cup. "They're going to need therapy. You know that, right? This kind of trauma, finding out their mother has been lying their whole lives, it's going to mess them up." Each word was like a knife, but Rebecca didn't argue. He was right. "I'll pay for whatever they need." "With what money?" Daniel asked. "You'll be unemployed as soon as this hits the news." "And legal fees for a case like this?" "We'll be lucky if we don't lose the house." Rebecca hadn't thought about the financial implications. She'd been so focused on the emotional fallout that the practical realities hadn't registered. But Daniel was right. Her career was over. They'd have to spend their savings on her defense. Everything they'd built would be gone. At 9:30, Rebecca grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Daniel didn't offer to drive her or even say goodbye. But as she reached for the doorknob, he spoke. "I keep trying to figure out who you really are," he said. "The woman I married, the mother of my children, or the person who killed someone and ran away. And I can't reconcile the two. I don't know if I ever will." Rebecca turned to face him. "I'm both. That's the awful truth. I'm the person who made a terrible mistake, and the person who's been trying to make up for it ever since. Both of those people are real. Making up for it would have meant turning yourself in," Daniel said. "Everything else is just you trying to feel better about being a coward." He was right, and Rebecca knew it. She left without another word. The police station was downtown, and Rebecca met Richard Torres in the parking lot. He was in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of calm confidence that comes from years of experience. They shook hands, and he got right to business. "I've reviewed what information we have so far," he said as they walked toward the building. "The traffic camera footage is circumstantial, but combined with Tyler Richardson's statement, they have enough to charge you. The good news is you were a teenager at the time. The bad news is you fled the scene and avoided justice for over 2 decades. What am I looking at?" Rebecca asked. "In terms of sentencing? Hard to say this early. Vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene. Obstruction of justice. If they stack the charges and you're convicted on all counts, you could face 15 to 20 years. But there are factors that could work in your favor. Your age at the time, the fact that you eventually came forward, your clean record since then. We might be able to negotiate something in the range of 5 to 8 years. 5 to 8 years. Rebecca tried to imagine it. Her daughter would be in college. Her son would graduate high school without her there. She'd miss everything. Birthdays, holidays, milestones. Years of her life gone, locked away. But Andrew Patterson's children had missed more. They'd missed having a father their entire lives. 23 years of graduations and birthdays and weddings he'd never see. Rebecca's potential prison time seemed almost trivial in comparison. Inside the station, Detective Bowman was waiting. She led them to an interview room, and the formal process began. Rebecca was read her rights. She was fingerprinted and photographed. The reality of becoming a criminal, of being processed through the system, hit her hard. She'd always been on the other side of this. The respectable citizen, the upstanding community member. Now she was the person being arrested. She gave her statement, admitting everything. Richard tried to limit what she said, but Rebecca wanted it all on record. She was done running, done hiding. If she was going to face consequences, she'd face them honestly. By noon, news vans were already gathering outside the police station. Someone had leaked it. Probably someone in the department who recognized her name or her position. Richard shielded her from cameras as they escorted her out to arrange bail. Her bail was set at $200,000. Daniel had to put up the house as collateral. The look on his face when he signed the papers would haunt her forever. She was literally risking their family home, the place their children had grown up, for her freedom while awaiting trial. By the time they got home that afternoon, it was everywhere. Every local news station led with the story. Tech executive arrested in 23-year-old hit and run. Her photo was plastered across screens and websites. Some outlets had dug up her old college photos from when she was still Maggie Sullivan. The contrast was stark. The young blonde college kid versus the successful middle-aged executive. The phone started ringing off the hook. Reporters wanting comments. Neighbors calling with questions. Friends who'd seen the news and couldn't believe it. Daniel unplugged the landline and stopped answering his cell. By evening, news crews had set up camp outside their house. Neighbors stood on their lawns, watching and whispering. Rebecca peeked through the curtains and saw her life becoming a spectacle. Camera crews and satellite trucks lined their quiet suburban street. This was the neighborhood where Kevin rode his bike, where Amy had learned to drive. Now it was a media circus. Her phone buzzed constantly. Texts from colleagues, emails from her company's HR department, a formal letter arrived by email from her boss. She was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. They couldn't say she was fired yet, not until she was convicted, but everyone knew what administrative leave meant. Her career at the company was over. Social media was worse. Her name was trending on local Twitter. People who'd never met her had opinions about what kind of person she was, what should happen to her. Some comments were sympathetic, noting she was just a teenager when it happened, but most were harsh, calling her a murderer, a liar, a monster, demanding she get the maximum sentence. Someone had found photos of Andrew Patterson's family. His widow, Linda, gave a statement to the press. Rebecca forced herself to watch it, even though every word felt like a physical blow. For 23 years, my family has lived without answers, Linda said, her voice strong despite obvious emotion. My children grew up without their father. They never got to know the man who loved them so much. And the person responsible has been living a comfortable life, raising her own family, advancing her career while we suffered. I'm glad the truth has finally come out. Justice delayed is still justice. Rebecca watched with tears streaming down her face. Linda was right about everything. She'd lived comfortably while this family suffered. She'd raised her children while Andrew's kids grew up fatherless. There was no justification for any of it. The internet detectives went to work fast. By nightfall, people had posted photos of Rebecca's house, her children's school, Daniel's law firm. Amy's social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments. People called her the daughter of a murderer, said she came from bad blood. Some comments were so vicious that Amy deleted all her accounts, but screenshots had already been shared everywhere. Kevin's basketball coach called. Some parents had complained, saying they didn't want their children on the same team as a killer's son. The coach was sympathetic but said maybe Kevin should sit out this season, let things cool down. Rebecca watched her children's lives fall apart alongside her own. Amy stopped coming out of her room except for meals. Kevin wouldn't speak to anyone. They'd become collateral damage in her disaster. Friends who Rebecca had known for years suddenly stopped calling. The weeks following Rebecca's arrest blurred together in a nightmare of legal meetings, court appearances, and crushing isolation. Her lawyer, Richard Torres, worked tirelessly on her case, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Tyler Richardson's deathbed confession was detailed and credible. The recovered footage, while grainy, showed enough to establish a timeline. And Rebecca's own admission sealed everything. Richard pushed for a plea deal. The prosecutor's office was willing to negotiate, but their offers weren't generous. They wanted Rebecca to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommendation of 10 to 12 years. Richard argued it was too harsh given her age at the time of the incident, her clean record since, and the fact that she'd ultimately cooperated. But the prosecutor wouldn't budge much. The public attention on the case made leniency politically difficult. Public opinion matters, Richard explained during one of their meetings. This is a high-profile case now. Andrew Patterson's family has a lot of community support. The prosecutor can't be seen as going easy on you. Rebecca sat in his office, exhausted from another sleepless night. What if I don't take the plea? What if we go to trial? Richard leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. Then you're rolling the dice. If a jury convicts you on all counts, you could face 15 to 20 years. On the other hand, there's a chance, a small one, that a jury might be sympathetic to the fact that you were 19 and scared. But I wouldn't count on it. The facts are bad, Rebecca. You fled the scene. You hid for decades. You built a life while Andrew Patterson's family suffered. No jury is going to overlook that. Rebecca knew he was right. But the thought of pleading guilty, of standing in court and admitting her crimes publicly, terrified her almost as much as the prison time itself. Though deep down she knew it was what she needed to do. She'd run from responsibility once. She couldn't do it again. I need to think about it, she said. At home, the situation had somehow gotten worse. Daniel had moved into the guest room permanently. He went to work, came home, and spent most of his time in his room or helping the kids with their homework. He spoke to Rebecca only when absolutely necessary. And even then, his words were cold and functional. Amy had started seeing a therapist, which was good, but she blamed Rebecca for needing one in the first place. She'd stopped calling her mom, instead referring to her as Rebecca when she bothered to acknowledge her at all. The distance in her daughter's eyes broke Rebecca's heart every single day. Kevin had withdrawn completely. He'd quit basketball, stopped hanging out with friends, and spent most of his time gaming in his room. His grades were slipping. His teachers called Daniel with concerns, but there wasn't much anyone could do. How do you help a kid process the fact that his mother killed someone and lied about it his whole life? One evening, about a month after the arrest, Rebecca found Daniel in the kitchen making dinner. She'd been avoiding him mostly, giving him space, but they needed to talk about the plea deal. Richard says I should take it, she said quietly. The plea, 10 to 12 years. Daniel kept chopping vegetables, not looking at her. That's your decision to make. I know. But I wanted to talk to you about it. About what it means for the family. He finally looked up, and the coldness in his eyes made her flinch. What it means for the family? Rebecca, you destroyed this family the moment you kept that secret from me. Whether you're in prison for 10 years or 20 doesn't change that. Are you going to divorce me? The question came out smaller than she intended. Daniel set down the knife. I don't know. I've thought about it constantly. But divorcing you now while you're facing prison time, it feels like kicking someone when they're down. And what would that do to the kids? They're already devastated. Do they need to process their parents' divorce on top of everything else? So you're staying out of obligation. I'm staying because I don't know what else to do, Daniel said, his voice breaking slightly. I loved you, Rebecca. I loved who I thought you were. And I keep waiting to hate you completely, but I can't quite get there. Maybe because I know the person you've been for the last 18 years. Maybe because I see how much you're suffering. I don't know. But don't mistake my staying for forgiveness. I don't know if I can ever forgive this. Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't expect you to. I just need you to know that I'm going to take the plea. I'm going to admit what I did. And I'm going to face whatever consequences come. Good, Daniel said. It's the least you can do. 2 weeks later, Rebecca stood in court and formally entered her guilty plea. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and most significantly, Andrew Patterson's family. His widow, Linda, sat in the front row flanked by her 3 adult children. Rebecca had to face them as she admitted her guilt. The judge asked if she understood the charges. She said yes. He asked if anyone had coerced her into this plea. She said no. He asked if she was pleading guilty because she was in fact guilty. She said yes, her voice clear despite the tears. Then came the victim impact statements. This was what Rebecca had been dreading most. She'd agreed with Richard that she wouldn't object to them, no matter how painful they were. She owed Andrew's family the chance to speak. Linda went first. She was in her late 50s now, her hair gray, her face lined with years of grief. She held a photo of Andrew, young and smiling as she spoke. Andrew was my best friend, she began, her voice wavering but strong. We met in high school. We grew up together. We built a life together. He worked 2 jobs to support our family. He never complained. He loved his children more than anything in the world. She paused, looking directly at Rebecca. The night he died, he was walking home from his shift at the restaurant. He was tired. He probably wasn't paying as much attention as he should have been when he stepped off that curb. But that doesn't excuse what you did. You hit him and you left him there to die alone in the rain. You drove away and let my babies grow up without their father. Rebecca couldn't stop the tears now. Every word was deserved, every accusation true. For 23 years I wondered who did this, Linda continued. I imagined all kinds of scenarios. A drunk driver too scared to face what they'd done. A teenager who panicked. I told myself that maybe, somewhere out there, the person responsible was sorry, that they carried guilt even if they never came forward. And maybe you did carry guilt. But you also carried on with your life. You got married. You had children of your own. You built a successful career. While I worked 3 jobs to keep my kids fed and clothed, while my children cried themselves to sleep asking why their daddy wasn't coming home. Andrew's oldest daughter, Rachel, spoke next. She was 30 now, a mother herself. I was 7 when my dad died, she said. I barely remember him. Just fragments. His laugh. The way he'd toss me in the air. The smell of his cologne. But I grew up with this huge hole in my life where he should have been. He missed my first day of middle school. My high school graduation, my wedding. He's never met his grandchildren. And you took that from us. You took everything. Each family member spoke, and each one tore another piece out of Rebecca's heart. By the time they finished, she was sobbing openly in court. But she didn't look away. She owed them the dignity of hearing their pain without hiding from it. When it was Rebecca's turn to speak, Richard had prepared a statement for her. But when she stood up, she set the paper aside. This needed to come from her, not from carefully crafted legal language. I have no excuse for what I did, she began, her voice shaking. I was young and scared, but that's not an excuse. I made a choice that night to drive away, and I've made the choice every day since to stay silent. I told myself I was a good person despite this one terrible thing. I convinced myself that I'd paid enough in guilt. But the truth is, I'm not a good person. A good person would have stopped that night. A good person would have called for help. A good person would have turned herself in years ago. She looked at Andrew's family. I can't give you back what I took. I can't bring Andrew back. I can't give you the last 23 years. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about him. About you. About the lives I destroyed. I lived with the guilt, but that was selfish too. Because guilt is about my pain, not yours. Guilt is about how bad I felt, not about making things right. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just trying to finally tell the complete truth. I was wrong. I've been wrong for 23 years. And I'm deeply, truly sorry. The courtroom was silent when she sat down. Richard squeezed her shoulder, but Rebecca barely felt it. She'd said what needed to be said. Now came the judgment. The prosecutor stood and made his recommendation. 10 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 if she maintained good behavior. He acknowledged Rebecca's guilty plea and her cooperation, but emphasized the severity of her crimes and the decades of suffering she'd caused. The judge took a recess to consider the sentence. Rebecca sat in the courtroom, waiting, her whole body numb. Daniel was there, sitting in the back. She'd told him he didn't have to come, but he'd said someone from the family should be present. Amy and Kevin had stayed home. They couldn't bear to watch. The 30 days between sentencing and reporting to prison passed in a strange, suspended state. Rebecca moved through her house like a ghost, trying to prepare for 8 years away from everything she knew. 8 years of her life gone. 8 years of her children's lives that she'd missed completely. She spent hours writing letters to Amy and Kevin, one for each birthday she'd miss, each holiday, each milestone. Letters for Amy's high school graduation, her college acceptance, her first serious relationship, letters for Kevin's 16th birthday, his driver's license, his own graduation. She didn't know if they'd read them, but she wrote them anyway. Daniel had taken charge of the practical matters, finances, bills, maintaining the house. They'd had to sell Rebecca's car to help pay for legal fees, and the restitution the court ordered. Their savings were nearly wiped out. Daniel would be raising 2 teenagers alone on his salary, and money would be tight. I can get a job when I get out, Rebecca had offered weakly. Daniel had just looked at her, With a felony conviction? Doing what? He was right. Her career in tech was over. Her professional reputation was destroyed. When she got out of prison, she'd be in her 50s with a criminal record and an 8-year gap in her resume. The comfortable life she'd built was gone forever. Amy agreed to see Rebecca 3 days before she had to report. They sat in the backyard on the patio furniture where they'd spent countless summer evenings. Amy looked older somehow, like she'd aged years in the past few months. The light had gone out of her eyes. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. It felt inadequate, but it was all she had. Amy picked at the hem of her shirt. "Everyone at school knows. They whisper when I walk by. Some of the parents complained that I shouldn't be allowed at school events because of what you did, like I'm somehow dangerous because you killed someone." Each word was a knife, but Rebecca didn't flinch. "I know I've made your life hell. Both of you. I never wanted that. But you did it anyway," Amy said. "That's what I can't get past. You knew this secret could destroy our family, and you kept it anyway. You chose to lie to us every single day of our lives." "I did. And that was wrong." Amy finally looked at her mother, really looked at her. "Was any of it real? All those times you talked to me about being honest, about having integrity, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. Was that all just you being a hypocrite?" Rebecca's throat tightened. "I meant every word of it. I wanted better for you than what I'd been. I wanted you to be the person I wasn't brave enough to be." "That's not fair," Amy said, her voice rising. "You don't get to use me to make yourself feel better about being a coward. I didn't ask to be your second chance at having a conscience." She was right. Rebecca had been using her children as evidence that she was a good person, that she'd changed, that she deserved her comfortable life. But none of that absolved her of what she'd done. "You're right," Rebecca said quietly. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For the lies, for the pain I've caused you, for ruining your life. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that none of this is your fault. You're a good person, Amy. Better than I ever was. And I'm so proud of you, even though I have no right to be." Amy stood up to leave. At the door, she turned back. "I don't know if I'll visit you in prison. Dad says we should think about it, that it's our choice. But I don't know if I can. It hurts too much to look at you." "I understand," Rebecca said, meaning it. "Whatever you decide is okay. I love you, sweetheart. Even if you never want to see me again, I'll always love you." Amy left without responding. Rebecca sat alone in the backyard for a long time after, watching the sun set over the fence. How many more sunsets would she see before she went away? How many more times would she sit in her own backyard, breathe fresh air, feel the evening breeze? Kevin never agreed to talk to her. He stayed in his room, door locked, refusing to come out even when she knocked and begged. On her last night at home, she slipped a letter under his door. In it, she told him everything she wished she could say in person. That she was sorry. That she understood his anger. That he had every right to hate her. That she hoped someday he might understand that people can be both good and bad. That we're all more complicated than we seem. That she'd always be his mother, even if he never wanted to see her again. The morning she had to report to prison, Rebecca woke up at dawn. Her last morning in her own bed for 8 years. Her last morning in her own house. She made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood wake up. People heading to work, kids waiting for school buses, normal life continuing while hers stopped. Daniel came downstairs at 7. He was driving her to the prison about 2 hours away. It would be one of the last times they'd be alone together for years. The drive was mostly silent, neither of them knowing what to say. What do you say to someone whose life you've destroyed? What do you say to someone who's about to leave you to raise 2 traumatized teenagers alone? About halfway there, Daniel finally spoke. "I've been thinking about something Linda Patterson said in court, about how she worked 3 jobs to support her kids after Andrew died." Rebecca waited, not sure where this was going. "I have 1 job, and I'll be okay financially," he continued. "It'll be tight, but we'll manage. But those kids grew up without a father because of you. They struggled in ways mine won't. And I keep thinking about that, about how unfair it all is." "It is unfair," Rebecca agreed. "Completely unfair." "The kids asked if they could change their last name," Daniel said. "They don't want to be Chen anymore. They want my name." That hurt more than Rebecca expected, but she understood. "Okay, whatever helps them." "I told them to wait," Daniel said. "Until they're 18, until they're sure. Because that's a big decision. And they're making it out of anger right now. But Rebecca, they're ashamed to have your name. Your own children are ashamed of you." Rebecca nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. When they arrived at the prison, Daniel pulled into the parking lot and turned off the engine. They sat there for a moment, the reality of what was about to happen settling over them both. "I don't know if I'll bring the kids to visit," Daniel said finally. "Their therapist says it should be their choice, but they're too young to make that kind of decision. So I'll decide for them, and I honestly don't know what's right." "Whatever you think is best," Rebecca said. "I trust your judgment." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You trust my judgment? That's rich coming from someone who lied to me for 18 years. "I know. I'm sorry. For everything." They got out of the car. Daniel walked with her to the entrance, carrying the small bag of approved items she was allowed to bring. At the door, he stopped. "I need to know something," he said. "If the police had never found out, if you'd gotten away with it, would you ever have told me?" Rebecca thought about lying, about giving him the answer he wanted to hear. But she was done lying. "No, probably not. I wanted to believe I'd left it behind forever." Daniel nodded like he'd expected that answer. "At least you're being honest now, for what that's worth." He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "Despite everything, I hope you survive this. Not for your sake, but for the kids. They've already lost the mother they thought they had. I don't want them to lose the one they've got left." Then he walked away, and Rebecca watched him go. The last connection to her old life disappearing across the parking lot. Inside, the prison intake process was dehumanizing but necessary. They took her clothes, her jewelry, her wedding ring. They gave her a uniform and a number. She became inmate 847293. No longer Rebecca Chen, successful executive and mother, just another prisoner serving time for her crimes. The first few months were the hardest. Rebecca had never been in trouble before, never even gotten a speeding ticket. Now she was surrounded by women who'd lived hard lives, made hard choices, and didn't have much patience for a rich lady who'd killed someone and run away. But slowly, Rebecca found her place. She got a job in the prison library. She took classes, earned certificates in things that might help her find work when she got out. She joined a group for inmates seeking redemption, where they talked about their crimes and their guilt and their hopes for the future. She wrote letters to her children every week, even though they rarely wrote back. Amy sent a short note on Rebecca's first Christmas in prison. It said simply, "Merry Christmas. We're doing okay." Kevin never wrote at all, but Daniel mentioned him in his occasional letters. He'd made the basketball team. His grades were improving. He had a girlfriend. Life was going on without her. Daniel visited 3 times that first year alone. He never brought the kids. The visits were awkward and painful, filled with long silences and careful conversations about practical matters. But he came, and Rebecca was grateful for that. On her second year inside, something unexpected happened. Linda Patterson wrote to her. Rebecca stared at the letter for a full day before she had the courage to open it. The letter was short. Linda said she wasn't writing to forgive Rebecca or to offer comfort. She was writing because her therapist suggested it might help with closure. She wrote about Andrew, about the man he was, the father he'd been. She wrote about how his death had shattered their family, but also in strange ways, brought them closer together.